Did school kill your creativity and your retirement plan? In this episode, we're going to unpack the Breakpoint and Beyond study on divergent thinking, why most adults lose their problem-solving edge, and how the mindset shows up in cookie-cutter financial plans. If your retirement strategy looks beige, it might be time to rediscover the creativity you had at age 5 and build a legacy as unique as you are.
This is an algebra class. We're not saying, like there's one answer in the back of the book here. The reality is that life isn't a standardized test.
Look at all of your options, because there are so many more options out there that people don't even know about.
Before we even get to, where to put the money, it's really having discussion of what is the problem and where are we trying to go. Okay? It's having a much bigger discussion outside of just numbers and math. Tired of beige plans and cookie cutter strategy? Let's have a conversation.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Legacy Life podcast. We're back here today on this beautiful Wednesday morning. We are, talking about what you just heard. Did school kill your creativity and potentially your retirement plan? Yeah. And me and you were talking about this topic earlier this week, and I could just tell there's a lot of passion behind what you were saying and what you're talking about, because I think a lot of the time it's hard to communicate your heart and potential realities to people when they have been very much shown the opposite of what you're trying to tell them their entire life. Yeah. It's very hard for people to take in new things. I mean, sometimes it's very exciting. It's like, oh, you know what? This thing's new. It's like the shiny object syndrome that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. But when the new things confront ideologies that we've been taught for so long, people have a hard time taking it in. And I could tell you're very passionate about this topic.
It's true. And it's because, like with most things in life, we do take a lot for granted. Especially when we think about, well, this is the way something works. This is the way it's always worked. This is just what you do when you come around situation A. And what makes it tough about taking things for granted is that we're taking them for granted. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what makes it hard.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even necessarily realize that we may have confined ourselves to, a box. I think there is I forget the name of the study, but this person, they had taken these insects, like spiders and centipedes, these different, and they put them on a white sheet of paper, and then they drew a circle around them. And the bug never went outside the circle after they drew it around them.
I think I've seen this. Yeah.
And so it's white paper, then they draw it around them, and then they can never get themselves outside of that line. They always come up to the line and always stop without even realizing that they could cross the line and go beyond. And it just shows and proves that we all live that way. Sometimes we draw our own lines around ourselves and don't think we can go outside of them. And that really shows up a lot in planning meetings. People come in and they have their own assumptions of how it's supposed to go. And this all, I think, kind of stems back. I can remember hearing about this for the first time, and every time I hear about it, I feel like it's the first time. So I know something in me it deeply resonates with. There is these researchers that they were hired by NASA to do a job where these researchers come in and they were to measure what they call creative potential in people, okay? And for problem solving and the need for innovation and those kind of things. And so what they discovered, they put into a book called Breakpoint and Beyond, basically. And it was a test in an area what they call divergent thinking, and which in essence means the ability to come up with multiple solutions to a problem, to a single problem. All right. And so they tested 1,600 people in this test. Okay. And to see how many of the 1,600 would score in the genius level of divergent thinking. Okay. And, if you ask people, what do you think? How many people the 1,600, a lot of people could come up with various answers. But the thing that you had to know about the study is that these 1,600 people they started with were all kindergartners. Okay. They're all about age 5. And so how many you think, would score at genius level at age 5 in this area?
If I didn't have the number right in front of me, I would probably say just because I know kids are very much creative thinkers because they don't have life experience to like kind of jade them a little bit.
hmm
I would say like 50 or 60% probably.
Sure.
Yeah.
And in this test, 98% of them scored at genius level. Okay. So what does that tell us? It tells us that we're all born with this capacity to be really good at this, and that it slowly, erodes over time. Because as what they did with this study, it was what they call a longitudinal study. So then they took the same 1,600 kids and tested them again 5 years later, and then again 5 years later, and so forth into adulthood. Okay. And so the results by age 10, the number had dropped to 30%. By 15, 12%. And when they tested the adults, 2%. So what does this tell us? One, yes, we're born with this capacity. And it shows you that we don't grow into creativity.
Right.
It shows that mostly it declines in us. And there can be a lot of reasons why this happens. But I am convinced that one of the main reasons that it happens is because by the time they were 10, 15, they had become educated. Okay. And they had been told that there's one solution, one way of solving. There's one answer in the back of the book. Don't look because you'll be cheating. If you do it outside of school, they call it collaboration. Right. Right. And so what this tells us is that this capacity slowly erodes in us, when I think the opposite should be happening. If we're talking about, we're not getting into just, talking about educating kids today, but the fact is that if this is happening to us, we take this into our lives and apply it to multiple situations as we go on to live. Maybe, how we approach, this is how you raise kids, this is how you plan for retirement. This is what you do. Right. And so you start to get yourself narrowed down where you're no longer able to find the multiple solutions. Because look, with these young kids, they might have asked them, in this amount of time, how many uses can you come up with a paperclip?
Right.
And, some of these kids came up with over 200 ideas. And of course, they start thinking like, well, does the paperclip have to be this big, or can it be 10 feet tall? And can it be made out of this kind of material? Right. Because they think outside of the parameters that we usually set on ourselves. And so you fast forward to adulthood, and I can tell you the reason I get so passionate about this is because after sitting with, over 1,000 families in almost 20 years, you start to hear, the questions that people come in with to these planning meetings. So what % should I have in bonds and mutual funds when I retire?
Yeah.
Like that's one of the first questions, because the assumption is, well, that's going to be the configuration, right? Which ones would be less risky? But it's going to be something like this, right? It's going to look this way. And to be honest, it kind of, after a while, I started to scratch my head a little bit and like, well, why are we starting there? I mean, because before we even get there, what's the problem we're even looking at first and foremost, right?
I was talking with some people last night, and they were just talking about, like investing your money. Well, we were talking about people in my generation, how a lot of us don't have the slightest hope of owning a home at the age that somebody in previous generation could, just because everything is so expensive now. And so this conversation evolved into, well, you know what? Well, it'd be a good idea to start investing your money now then, and they're like, and you don't have to know a lot about investing. You just put your money in your typical growth mutual fund and call it good, and
Yep,
you'll
that's
be
just
okay.
what you
That's
do.
just what you do, and you should be good. And I challenged them a little bit on it, and they were like, well, like, what else do you do? Like a high yield savings account? Like, what are you supposed to do?
Exactly.
And so, like, and just to preface, one, again, we're not telling anybody how they should invest their money, but like, look at all of your options, because there are so many more options out there that people like don't even know about. Like, people talk about how they, oh, you know what, I subscribe to the 80-20 rule and all the different things, and the things that you hear over and over, but there's so much more out there to look at. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be, you know, what we talk about all the time, but there's just a lot more. There's a wide variety of options. It's not just your basic mutual funds
Cookie cutter world.
That everyone talks about.
Yeah, and even outside of the options, sometimes it's not even just about the options, but the creative process that can come into play and how to get from point A to where you're trying to head. This is an algebra class. We're not saying, like there's one answer in the back of the book here. The reality is that life isn't a standardized test. I think maybe that we put it that way. It's unique. Your goals, your family, your legacy, they don't fit neat, into a neat percentage split between bonds and mutual funds necessarily. That's I think we've started thinking small rather than thinking larger. Before we even get to, where to put the money, it's really having discussion of what is the problem and where are we trying to go. Okay. It's having a much bigger discussion outside of just numbers and math. But since we've been conditioned from school age to hunt for the one right answer, that's why we miss out on what I think you're getting to, at the flexibility and the creativity that could make a retirement planning meaningful. And, and instead of doing that, what do most people end up with that we see? A plan that looks beige. Yep. Right? And honestly, does anyone brag about beige?
Some people do.
Maybe some do.
So we for
this
sure
chair is a little off-white. No.
we for sure had people, brag about beige.
Yep.
But it's when you see and are taught that is what you do, and that's what makes you successful.
You're in that circle that you can't see outside of.
But why would you not brag about it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? When you aren't fully aware of the situation or fully see all the different options, or even what your issue really is. Yep. What's your actual goal? What's the problem you're trying to solve? Like, these questions you're asking before you invest, instead of just being like, well, this is what I'm told, this is what I'll do, and I'll brag about it because I'm doing the right thing, right?
Right.
It's like, I want people to know I'm doing the right thing.
Right. Right. Because you go to dinner parties and you say, yeah, I'm in this fund, I'm in that fund. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, cool. Yeah. No one even everyone, the default response is, yeah, of course. But you bring up something outside that and people look at you like you're from Mars. Yeah. Like, why would you do that? Exactly. Great question. Why don't we talk about why we might do that, right? Because at the end of the day, when people come in, if we're just going to talk about retirement planning and they want a plan, first and foremost, the number one problem that people, last night I had this discussion with somebody. They said, yeah, they've had an advisor for a long time. They've had a good working relationship with their current advisor, which is great. And then they said, yeah, but I've been talking to all these other people and they're giving me all this mixed information. It's all the same types of investments, but aggressive, conservative, right? These other words are just kind of verbiage is thrown out. And my first thought was, you've had a relationship with this advisor for 20 plus years, but you're talking to all these other people. What's going on? Yeah. Right? Something is being unsettled, but in the conversation and the verbiage he's using, it's all the same lingo everyone's using, but there's still a restlessness underneath. And I think that's the point, is like, right, even with all the cookie cutter strategies and all this is the right answer and everyone just accepts as yes, 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 it still hasn't solved a lingering subconscious feeling on the inside that something's not right, something's not settled, right? And if people can get honest with themselves, it's there. And otherwise, your 20-year relationship, you wouldn't be talking to anyone else.
Right, exactly.
What's the problem, right? Well, this person's getting close to retirement. And so somewhere in the back of the mind is like, well, am I really ready?
Yeah.
Right? And so when we start having this discussion and you start getting into, okay, so what are you trying to do? What are you hoping to accomplish? What do you want for your kids? How is your estate plan going to be administered? Do you have multi-generational wealth on your mind, or do you not even care what happens? Right? You start getting those questions. And when he started to respond, he realized, my gosh, his real problem is what we call the income shortfall. When he started looking at what he was trying to accomplish and realized he had no solution on how what he had saved was going to be able to solve for how much income he actually needed. He had no idea. Even with all the information he had been getting all the other places, we stopped and we put all that aside and said, forget products, forget, mutual funds, forget all of that for a minute. And you get to that crux of it. Now it opened up his world to something completely different. He said, and his exact words were, nobody has ever taken the time to show me this. Nobody. Okay? So if that's the case, first of all, my heart's broken because I would hope every financial advisor would show people that. Okay? But surveys show that most verbiage around how we approach people for financial planning is around what I can do for you, rather than what is the problem. And this is a big issue. And so when we come around people showing what we can do, we just spit out the same verbiage, almost like a computer's just printing out the same spreadsheet over and over and over again. Right? And this is really, I think, selling people short and not giving them the best possibilities of putting their best foot forward to have the best results they could possibly have with everything they've spent a lifetime saving.
Right. Because it's not even really helping them per se. You're quote unquote investing their money for them. But if you haven't even had the conversation about their shortfall or what their goal is, what their real goal is, because exactly outside of numbers, outside of are you conservative, moderate, or aggressive, risk, get that question out of there. The questions that you ask are good questions. Is generational legacy important to you, or does that not matter to you? What's important to you? What's your goal, and how do you want to get there? Right? Then you can ask how you want to get there, and then we can look at the different options. But I mean, this is statistically proven too. It's craziness.
It is. Yeah, they say about 65% of financial advisors still just mutual funds as the main strategy. That's the 2/3.
Right.
Okay. And 90% of them use ETFs, which we could do a whole episode on those. Yeah. And I'm not saying that bad or good. I'm just saying we should do an episode on it to say, okay, so but why an ETF? What is it actually helping them accomplish? 92% do dabble in alternatives, but it's a very small portion of the overall plan. So the lane, mutual funds, ETFs, clearly that is the standard operating procedure of the conversation and where it lands. But the results speak for themselves. You can look at the Dalbar study. You can look at Harvard studies. There was a study done several years back on the 4% rule that a Harvard study did, and they said, actually, it should be more like 2%, 2.6% rule. They said 4% might even be too much because of how the strategy works and the risks that people are taking on by using that strategy. And so in these Dalbar study, the average mutual fund investor earned about 3.66% a year, while the S&P return has been about 10.35% during the same period. Okay. Now, why is that happening? Is it because of the choices of the types of funds? Sometimes. But what's happening is that the emotional response of people in those type of investments when the markets fluctuate wildly, because everything's tied to value in those investments, is to panic and to get in and out at different times when the market is vacillating. So their total end return ends up being so much smaller than what the actual market was bringing back.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of what they're choosing. It's a combination of their emotions. Because if the plan is so great and this go-to is so good, why are people still panicking and making these wildly emotional decisions? It's because they're not settled.
Exactly. They're not secure.
They don't feel secure in it. They know something's wrong.
It's because they're not educated. If they were educated and really understood what they're investing in, then they would have that security and have that safety, because regardless of what the market is doing, they're like, oh no, like I know what's going on, right?
Yep.
But if they're not educated and they don't really know, then that's when the fear takes place.
It does. And so, just saying they're not necessarily educated in all the other ideas outside of the circle, the other alternatives, other ways of approaching looking at the planning.
Right. And that's not us saying that investors are stupid.
Yep. They're not.
That's us saying, like, as the advisor, it is the advisor's job to really educate first, right? Instead of just like, oh, cool, met you today. All right, this is our mutual fund. This is the rate of return that we average, and we'll put your money in there and call it good.
Right. And I mean, what we're saying here might make some people mad because we're not calling anyone stupid. We think people are capable of understanding. It's
100%.
just knowing that there's more to look at.
Right.
There's other things to consider, and there's a way to get this peace of mind.
Yeah.
By having totally changing the conversation, rather than just focusing on what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
So there are answers out there, and there are things that can be done.
Right.
So let's see, where else was I going to go with this?
Talk about the fees of mutual funds.
Oh gosh, yeah,
how they don't even have to disclose them. That's craziness to me.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to just have a sidebar on that for a minute, usually you see the expense ratio that's disclosed on a mutual fund, 30 basis points, 50 basis points, something. Right. But you can go look it up online. We won't do it here. You can go and look. It's a Forbes article online, the real cost of a mutual fund. You can look it up. It's an older article, but I think it was like 2012, but it's still just as relevant today as it was then. Look it up, read it. It's an easy read, but it goes through and shows you exactly how mutual funds are charged. And those fees inside those mutual funds are on top of the advisor fee. And if you're with a registered investment advisor or a broker dealer, they also charge fees.
Yep.
The mutual funds charge fees. That's on top of that. But read it for yourself. Just educate yourself on just that, just so you know. And that's not to say don't do mutual funds. It's just so if you are going to do it, you know what you're getting into.
Exactly. Again, to be fully actually educated and have a full grasp of what you're putting your money in, because it's your money.
Right.
Money that you worked hard for.
Exactly. Yep. So, unfortunately, just these paradigms of where education today is kind of, celebrating and rewarding uniformity, right? Rather than divergent, multiple answers, just the one answer one way. Life doesn't actually work that way. And so neither should our financial plans.
Yeah.
So legacy requires reawakening the creativity we had at age 5. It really does. It means asking, what if we did this differently? What if we design a plan that actually looks like my life story and not just another model portfolio?
Right. And you know what? Just got to say it. We're not saying act like a child, right?
No.
But there is something to be said about
childlikeness.
There's childlikeness, and there's also wisdom, right? And instead of allowing the jaded nature that comes with just growing up in general and aging, using your experience and using that to in collaboration with the childlikeness to actually look outside of the box, because obviously children don't have any scrap of wisdom inside of them, which is why they can have all these crazy ideas, right? But it's kind of beautiful in a way, and we miss out on that. And so bringing that childlikeness into it, not so much being like, you know what? Screw all responsibility. I'm just going to start making like random decisions. That's not what we're saying. But what we are saying is bring the childlikeness into the wisdom and the
Life
life
experience.
experience,
Mm-hmm.
and it can really change some things. But thinking outside of the box is really important.
Yeah. So we really want to encourage people today to say, you don't have to be a test taker. Start thinking like a creator.
Yeah.
Your financial plan should look like you, not like the guy next door or like a textbook model. And so if you're tired of beige plans and cookie cutter strategy, let's have a conversation. Head over to our calendar. There's a link in the description where you can head over to our calendar and let's start looking at designing something creative, flexible, and truly legacy worthy. And so I forgot to do it at the beginning this time, but if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And each week you'll be notified when our next episode has been published. And we look forward to being with you again real soon. Any closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, 95% of our viewership aren't subscribed. So if you enjoy what you're watching, it's completely free and it's very helpful. If you subscribe, help support us. And if you have anything you'd like to specifically hear about, leave a comment or email us. We have our email in our YouTube channel description. And then the link down below, you can schedule an appointment with us. But other than that,
Sounds good.
sweet.
Next time. See ya.